Okay, I'm going to tell you guys a story about Tricksie. Now, it was, let's see, about March, and my grandfather, his name was Thomas Wheeler, he decided to go to Nova Scotia, Canada on vacation, that summer. So, my family, we all decided to go with him. My parents and my grandfather and all of us, we were all going to go to Nova Scotia and have a visit to Nova Scotia for about 2 or 3 weeks. And so Tommy, my grandfather, he said, we're not going. He said, I don't want to go in the snow. I don't want to see snow, he said to my dad. My dad was sitting there at the table, and he said, we're going to have fun and everything. We're going to have lobsters and everything else. But, I don't want to see snow, he said. So he said, we're going to wait until the 1st of May. He said, the snow should all be gone by then, and we'll leave the very 1st of May. So I was excited, because I was just a kid. And I wanted to go to Canada and have a trip. I hadn't been there in a long time and everything. And, my parents and everything, everybody was excited. We're going to leave on this big trip. So the 1st of May came. We made the long drive up 95 all the way up to Nova Scotia, And it took us a little while because we weren't moving real fast. We were making about maybe 500 miles a day, But anyway, we landed in Nova Scotia, and it was still kind of cool, the weather and everything. And so we enjoyed our vacation, We had lobster and everything. But my grandmother, she started to say, I want a dog, to my grandfather. I want a dog. And she said, we can get a nice dog here in Nova Scotia. And my grandfather was kind of like, well, but she kept persisting at it. My grandmother, honest to God, she just was such a dog lover. It was unbelievable what a dog lover she was. She really was a dog lover, But my grandfather at that time, he didn't really want to get a dog right then. Now, this was a lot earlier. This was years before my grandfather got into dogs, But this was back when my grandmother was into dogs and my grandfather wasn't, if you can believe that, right? But this was years earlier. And I couldn't have been nothing more than a teenager, a really early teens, maybe 13 or 14, So anyway, we all got in Nova Scotia and we were having a good time and we were eating lobsters and we were going around and seeing the sights. We were going to places like Plaguey's Cove and Black Rock and we were camping and everything, And my grandmother says, I want this dog. I want this dog, Tommy. I want a dog. He says, well, what kind of dog do you want? She says, I want some sort of a bulldog, she said. He says, bulldog? What do you want a bulldog for? And she says, I want a bulldog. And she says, I was looking at these English bull terriers and stuff. And Tommy says, well, let me take a look at them. And he says, well, they are kind of cute, And she says, and she started looking more. And then she says, no, the one I want? She says, I want an English bulldog. Tommy says, well, okay, we'll go around. We'll look at some English bulldogs while we're here in Nova Scotia. So they looked up in the phone book and they found an English bulldog breeder. And they went out to visit him at his house. He had a nice house and everything, and he was breeding these English bulldogs, and they weren't real expensive. He had some pups there. I think they were like $150. He had a whole bunch of pups. Now, this is a long time ago, though, because now the English bulldog costs a lot more. But back then, this particular breeder, he's breeding them, and they weren't real expensive. So he had a nice pup there, a nice female. And she's real healthy and everything and really cute. My grandmother just fell in love with her, this little pup. And she was black and white, and she was a sturdy little thing, and she was really frisky and had a lot of energy. And my grandmother noticed that she was the one in the litter with the most energy, running around playing and stuff. My grandmother says, I'll take that one. That's the one I want. I want that one, that cute little one there. So my grandmother took the pup. And I think they got all its shots and everything while they were in Nova Scotia. And my grandmother got a kennel cab, to keep it in, And my grandmother it was only small. It was like a little baby. And my grandmother took it around with her while she was in Nova Scotia and treated it like it was a little baby. my grandmother was really enjoying this puppy, you know, and the puppy is so cute and everything else, you know, and it wasn't very big and everything. So come time we had to head back home. So we headed back home to what I used to call a ranch. And that was my grandmother's place. Now, my parents had a place about 10 miles away, but I called my grandparents' place the ranch. And why I called it the ranch was it was a big piece of property, about an acre. And my grandfather had fenced one side of it in. He had it all mowed, all the way back down to the lake, you know. And so the other side was all brush, very thick, heavy brush on one side, you know. And they had the front, a fence across the front. So when my grandparents landed at the ranch, the puppy began growing, of course, you know, and I used to visit them almost every day, you know. And my grandmother decided to name the puppy Tricksie. Awful cute, but it started to grow real fast. This dog had a personality that was just all energy. Tricksie was all energy. And honest to God, she was a little tank. I would go over there, like one day in particular, I went over there, I remember, and Tricksie was, I called Tricksie, and she was in the way down back, must have been down back by the lake, and she just come bolting up. Those little legs. She had legs her legs were about 4 inches long, you know, little short legs, stocky little legs, a great big, thick, rotundous body on her, and all this loose, her fur was loose and grizzly, you know, and she was built like a little tank. She come running, and her mouth was open, you know, and she was running up, and she come jumping, and then she'd jump up and land on your leg, you know. And she'd be like, grr, 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 you know, making these grrring sounds and trying to grab sticks on the ground. She loved to play with sticks. So I'd pick up a stick. And Trixie would look up at me, and her mouth would half be open. And she'd have this funny-looking smile on her face, this dog, you know, big, like a grin, you know, while she was breathing, just waiting for you to throw that stick. She'd throw the stick, and she'd run and grab it and bring it back. And then she'd sit there and want you to throw it again. But when you reached down to grab it out of her mouth, she would fight with you over it. She would hang on to it. And it would be an awful job to get the stick out of her mouth, and it'd be all covered with pasty. The end of the stick, that end of the stick. You didn't want to touch that end of the stick where she had it in her mouth. You know, it was all covered with gruel and everything else. You know. So anyway, throw the stick again. She'd be right on to play again. So anyway, the thing she loved to do the most, Trixie loved to do the most, was I had this old piece of carpet. It was a carpet I'd taken out of the front seat of a car, or it might have been a mat that they used to go inside the house, but it was like a rubber carpet, you know. And she used to grab the end of it, and I'd start to try to pull it out of her mouth, and then I'd start twirling her around. And quite literally, she would come right off of her feet and have a hold of that in her mouth, and she just loved to hang on to that and swing. I'd swing her in a circle. And you could see she was really enjoying that. She thought that was great fun to have a hold of that piece of rubber in her mouth and be swinging in a circle. And she's awful strong. Oh, her neck muscles and her teeth were so strong, but she wouldn't let go. Once she got in that mode with that piece of rubber carpet, she would not let go of it. And my game would be to try to get it free of her. And bend down, and she'd be on the ground. And I'd have her on the ground. You know, I'd pet her belly and stuff to try to take her attention away. But no, her teeth would still be tight on it. You know? And I'd like pet her back and stuff. And Trixie, come on, let go of it. Let go. And no, she'd be hang on to it. But I'd see her release her jaw a little bit. But as soon as I go to pull it out of her jaw, she'd tighten her jaw right back up again. Come on, Trixie. Come on, let go of this thing. She'd have a hold of it, you know, and I'd kind of stick my finger in her mouth a little bit and try to draw apart. And when I'd do that, she'd start growling, you know, and she'd tighten her grip right up tight on the thing. So then I'd grab her and spin her around a little bit again, you know, and come on, Trixie, let go. And finally, in the end, you know, I would be able to get it free from her, but only when she was ready to let go of it. Trixie would have a hold of that thing, and I'm telling you, what mouth jaw pressure those dogs have, those English bulldogs. If they ever bite down on your leg or something, they will not let go. I mean, and talk about jaw pressure. Well, this dog was just a little tank. She loved to run back and forth across the yard in the sunshine, and she'd jump. And you'd be surprised how high she could jump. She could jump clear the ground by about a foot underneath her feet. With those little tiny stubby legs, how could she get the energy to spring a foot in the air, like as she was running, like she'd spring a foot in the air and she would fly, like she'd fly for like 4 or 5 feet before she'd land again. Like a bound. She'd bound like a foot in the air, and her whole body would be up where she'd clear the air by about a foot. Now that doesn't sound like much, only a foot, but you have to realize something. That a foot in the air for a dog that's as stumpy and heavy as her, and built like a Sherman tank, was really quite an accomplishment. And the speed she could run at too, she could really move. So anyway, the summer went by, about 4 or 5 months, and Trixie was always into stuff, over at my grandpa's place. Always hearing stories about something she was doing, whether she was just mischief, because she was so full of energy. Sadly, what happened was, I'll tell you the story of what happened. Trixie somehow either went through the fence or over the top of the fence. It was between my neighbor's yard. Now, there's a guy not my neighbor's, but my grandfather's neighbor's yard, I should say. Now, this is interesting because there was a man that lived there, and his name was Mr. Casey. A very nice fellow, but he was a little bit on the fastidious side. He loved to keep everything really neat and clean and tidy, and he had all these little outbuildings that he built in his backyard. He kept everything organized inside each one of them. He had like these little you could buy them back in those days, like at Kmart's, or back there in those days there was a Kmart's and stuff. There's these little steel buildings you could buy, and they were like $50 to $100, but they were only like 8 by 8 size, and they were made of steel. And you could put them together yourself. They give you a kit. And you buy it at the store, and they give you a kit. And all you had to do was pour a little slab. And generally in those days, what they used to do is get the cement truck in, to pour a few slabs. And they'd do 2 or 3 to a time. So in Florida, so what they'd do is they would make a little form out of 2x4s, maybe 8 feet or 10 feet square, and they'd make 2 or 3 of them, and they'd lay them on the flat sand. They'd find a flat spot, and maybe they'd take a little rake, and they'd rake the sand around until they got it nice and flat with a level, and then they'd lay this form down, and then they'd get 2 or 3 of them built, and then they'd call a cement truck in with 3 or 4 yards of cement, which would cost about $100 or something, and the cement truck would come out, and he'd pour these slabs for you, and then you just take the rake and you go around and rake the cement in, and then level it out with the rake, and maybe use a little piece of wood, to tap and pat it and get it nice and smooth, and a day later your slabs were done. They'd harden up nice and hard, and then you were ready. So then you could go into Kmart's and buy one of these little kits, and made of steel, and everything would be there to build a little building, and it'd only take you a couple hours. You just put it up and follow the instructions and put the screws and bolts in, and you'd have a little steel building. So a lot of people had these buildings, and that's what they do in Florida, as part of the whole thing. The whole culture was building these buildings. People would have them in their backyard, and then they could keep your lawnmower in there. And so Casey had must have had 4 or 5 or 6 of these buildings out back, in back of his trailer. And he had a nice place, and he always kept it really neat. I mean, when you mow his grass and stuff, he would he would even do the edging, around everything. And he had a nice, neat yard. Everything was neat. He had a little swimming pool back there. And he also had a screen porch where he had screened in the whole back of his trailer on one of these slabs, but a bigger slab about maybe 10 feet by 20 feet size slab. He had a nice screen porch he'd put in there. It was all screened in completely. And with nice screening and everything. It must have cost him a bit of money, to put this screen porch in. And so screen porch was really nice. It was beautiful. Well, now, he used to like to sit out back there. He used to like he kind of liked Tricksie too, Mr. Casey did, he'd come over to the fence. And he'd watch and laugh at Tricksie and stuff. And Tricksie liked everybody. Tricksie has a lot of drool and everything, but she'd see a person and she'd whack little stump of a tail, be about 2 inches long, little stump of a tail, be go back and forth so fast, and friendly, very friendly dog, never mean with anybody or anything else like that. So here's the story the way I understand it. Casey, I guess, was having something to drink or whatever in the evening, having himself a little bit of something, a little toddy, a little something to drink out, and he was out in his porch, out in his back patio or whatever, and having it behind his screen room, inside his screen room and relaxing or whatever. Tricksie somehow bounded right over the fence, and she stopped. And she looked up. She saw Casey sitting there having his drink. So she spied him, and he spied her, and their eyes locked, and her little tail started to go back and forth, and she started bolting right toward Casey. Casey's like standing there. He's like stood up from his lawn chair, inside his screening room, and his hand was going back and forth like no, no, no. He said no, 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 and he knew what she was doing. No, 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 Tricksie, no, stop, Tricksie. Trixie's eyes are transfixed on it. All of a sudden, Tricksie starts bolting, and her little legs are just a-going, and she's picking up more speed, more momentum. 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. She's only looking at Casey with her little tail going, and she doesn't see the screen at all. She makes one of these leaps through the air that she makes, I told you about, where her feet clear the ground by about a whole foot in the air. And she hits the side of the screen with this force and energy of a bowling ball, a big heavy bowling ball going at 40 miles an hour. She hits the screen, and the screen is nothing. She makes a hole, a foot high on the screen, a complete circular around hole right through the screen, inside the screen room with Casey. And she's so full of energy. She's jumping up and down and wanting Casey to pet her and everything else. The screen was like nothing. It was like tissue paper. It was like a train going through a piece of wet tissue paper. It was absolutely nothing. But there's this perfect hole in the screen, where her body had went through. But actually, it was more like a tear. 2 tears, where her body went right through the screen. So she's sitting there wiggling back and forth and jumping up and down on Casey. And Casey's upset, very, very, very upset. Because Casey was like one of these guys that likes to see everything in its place and everything in order. But this dog represented the disorder of the universe. The way his tail was wiggling and everything else. So then, Tommy come out of the back of his place, across the place, and it must be 100 feet away. And then he starts saying, Tricksie, Tricksie, Tricksie! And all of a sudden, her eyes perked up and everything, and she heard Tommy, her master. Oh, I gotta get back, Tricksie said. So, she leaves Casey and goes running again, and she quickly gets up to speed. Within 5 feet, she's up to speed already, and bang, through the screen door again, through the other side of the screen door. Well, maybe 4 or 5 feet away, another hole. So Casey now, he sits his drink down. He's upset, very upset. Walks over to the fence. Tommy, Do you see what this dog did? Do you see? Look! She just did it! Tommy, no. Come on, Tricksie wouldn't do that. Yes, she did. Look at my screen. Come over here and look at this. And Tommy comes around, comes in through the front end of Casey, walks in, and stands there with his hands on his hips looking at that. And he's looking down at Tricksie, and Trixie's looking up so innocent at him. Looking up at Tommy like, did I do that? Tommy's like, oh my God. Casey, what are you going to do about this, Tommy? She's ripped these holes all through my screen. She jumped right through. Tommy's like, oh my gosh. I don't know. I'll have to fix it for you, Casey. Casey's like, well, okay, I wanted you to fix it for me. So Tommy took Tricksie back over, and he was awfully upset. And he locked her up and chained her. And she was on a chain, so she couldn't get away. He put her on a chain in one of the trees. And he said to my grandmother, he says, we can't keep a dog like this. He says, she needs more freedom, he said, or something like that. He said, we're gonna have to take her into the Humane Society or into the kennel. He said, we can't keep her. So that's what happened with Tricksie. My grandfather, he took her into he gave her up because he couldn't keep her because she had too much energy for him, My grandfather was getting a little bit older then. He was getting so that anyway, they decided to get rid of Tricksie then. So that was the story of Tricksie. That's what she did. She was a little tank of a dog. I used to think an awful lot of her, she was awful cute, she was fun to play with and everything else, but she just had too much energy for my grandparents, I guess, at that time. And my parents couldn't keep her, Anyway, so that's what happened to Tricksie. Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.